what's going on at the library and historical genealogy type things. So if you have your calendars or a piece of paper, you can write this down. The next thing that will be, let's see, July 25th, which is this Friday. They're going to have the Artist of the Month here at the library, and it is Melanie Hazen. And Miss Helen says that she does blown glass beads.
She does. She does beautiful work.
And makes jewelry. From 4 till 6 here at the library. So come by and see her art. The next thing I have is August the 12th. Is the next Historical Society meeting. And it's going to be at the new Tennessee Ridge City Hall. And it's going to be Miss Nina Finley talking about the history of Tennessee Ridge. So that would be interesting if y'all want to see that.
And what date was that?
August the 12th. It's 7 o'clock.
Tennessee Ridge.
At the Tennessee Ridge City Hall, the new City Hall. I haven't been in there yet, so I'm going to get to see that. And it's Nina Finley talking about the history of Tennessee Ridge. And the Scandinavians.
The ridge.
Huh?
The ridge.
The ridge. All you Erin people can come up the hill to the ridge. Yeah. Yeah, right. I can already tell you that the next genealogy class will be August the 26th, which is the last Tuesday of August. I hope that isn't a holiday, which I don't think it is. I don't know my topic yet. I never know my topic up until probably about a week before because I agonize over what to talk about.
Okay, August 12th.
I'm still on.
Come on, Pat.
Catch up. I had to get my calendar up.
It's all right. August 12th is the Historical Society at 7 o'clock. August 26th is the genealogy class. Someone tell me what that Tuesday before that is, what the date is.
19.
The 19th, August 19th, for anyone that's interested, is our next coffee chat. For those of you who don't come to the coffee chat, if you are a reader and like to discuss books, magazines, blogs, anything that we read, it will be here at the library. It's a bunch of people that get together and we just talk about what we read. A lot of book clubs, you pick a book and you read that book, you discuss the book. This one we talk about what everybody's reading. So there's a couple, 2 or 3 history people and a lot of vampires people, and so it doesn't matter what you're reading. And Mike brings us gadgets, tells us about gadgets. So, but we have a really good time. It's really just about promoting literacy, and because in a small community like this, you may do a lot of reading, but don't have anybody to talk to about it. Yes, it's at 5:30 here at the library, and we have free hot coffee. Something very, very special that I've personally been working on to get done, and I've gotten it done. September the 6th, here at the library will be an author signing, and it will be Miss Manoa Uffelman. She is a Houston County native. She's a history professor at Austin Peay. She has edited a book on the diaries of Nanny Haskins. Nanny Haskins was a 16-year-old girl who lived during the Civil War and wrote her diaries, and this is first-hand account of what was happening in Clarksville during the Civil War. So this book has just come out, and she will be here with books to sell and to sign.
What time will that be?
That will be on Saturday from 10 until 12. September the 6th is a Saturday, from 10 until 12.
12 in the library.
Yes. And one more. This is not at the library, but it's someone that we all know and love. October the 3rd, Miss Ann Hagler will have her books ready. She will be having a book signing. The book about the murder that happened here on the corner at Main Street, her relative, and it will be at the Erin Methodist Church. And I don't know the time on that, I'm sorry. Does anybody know the time on that?
It's from 4 to 6.
From 4 to 6. And that is what is October, the Saturday?
It's a Friday.
It's a Friday. But it's not here, it's over at the Erin Methodist Church. But she's been working on this book for a very, very long time and has done a lot of research. And it's going to be published.
I'm sorry, it's October 3rd.
That's what I said, October 3rd.
Oh, I'm sorry. 6.
Okay.
Okay, well, ignore that side of the room.
3rd from 4 to 6.
From 4 to 6 at the Erin Methodist Church. These 2 books are loaded with history. And so I would encourage everyone to go. If you actually are interested in writing your own family history, these two authors would be great to talk to about that. One day I'm going to write mine. I'm going to probably be very old if I ever get to it. Okay, I think that's all the announcements that I have. Before we get started, which we've already started, Miss Helen is our DAR representative, and I always like to give her just a few minutes to tell us about the DAR.
All right. Well, I couldn't think of anything because we don't meet in our chapter. We don't meet during June, July, and August. So our next big thing, although in June we had Flag Day, and so I talked about that last time, and we actually handed out flags that went out to every Meals on Wheels meal in Houston and Humphreys County for Flag Day. Everybody that got a meal delivered also got an American flag. So that was something
That was sweet.
gets done in y'all's county on our, we do on behalf of Flag Day. Anyway, but what I brought today was our next big thing is Constitution Day and Constitution Week, which is September, I'm going to just pass them around, which is September 17th to the 23rd is always Constitution Week. Constitution Day is September 17th. And we'll be having proclamations signed by both the county mayors of Houston County and the county mayor of Humphreys County, and then we'll do a Constitution Day lunch at Samuel's in the square in Waverly that day. If anybody would like to join us, we will be at the county mayor's office here at 10, and then the one in Waverly at 10:45, and then have lunch at 11. So anyway, you're all welcome to join us. And just a little bit about Constitution Day, that it commemorates the formation and signing of the U.S. Constitution and recognizes all who have become citizens by being born in the U.S. or by naturalization. It's observed on September 17th, which is the day the U.S. Constitutional Convention signed the Constitution in 1787. It's an American observance to commemorate the adoption of the U.S. Constitution. The observance runs annually. It was officially enacted on August 2nd, 1956 by President Dwight D. Eisenhower from a congressional resolution petitioned by the DAR. So just to give you a little information, a little background about it there. That's all that is. And then I brought some Constitution facts that you can...
I just put those down. That's what you handed out.
Oh, okay. I brought some Constitution facts that y'all can have and look at. You got 2 months till Constitution Day to get yourself all up on the Constitution. So there you go. Anyway, that's all I had for today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
And remember, if you are looking to become part of the DAR, please see Helen.
Yep.
And she and her group can help you get there.
We've had 6 new members so far this year in 2014, which is pretty good for a chapter our size. So
Good. Wonderful.
exciting. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to get started. The first thing I'm going to give you is the list of websites that I usually give you, and an announcement on the back. But I put a funny on the front, so I hope you can read it. This copy didn't come out too well. I thought it was pretty funny myself. It's for you and Dawn. I guess I can pass out papers better this way too. This is where this is. Don't you love it? Now it doesn't make you feel so bad. Yes, that's old Einstein there. Okay, on the second page, today, as the caption says, we're going to dig deeper into newspapers. We've talked about newspapers in the past, but hopefully tonight you'll learn something new or in addition to what you already know. It was difficult to come up with websites, newspaper websites, not because there aren't any, but because there are so many. And when I say so many, there are a lot of places where you can see newspapers or indexes of newspapers that are small and that aren't on major websites, so a lot of Googling will help you in that area. But the number one on the list is Chronicling America. This is through the Library of Congress. It's a free website, and they are constantly, every day, adding newspapers. I give you the link, and the newspapers are from all over the United States from 1836, and they only go up to 1922. So if you're looking for something after 1922, don't even go there. Not all newspapers are there. The Houston County Times is not there, but they are actively working to get there. I can tell you that there's a lot of Detroit newspapers there, a lot of northern newspapers, which is normally the case on a lot of websites, but it's free, so I would go there. You can search. They have a search bar. You can search, or you can go and find the newspaper and search by date, or you can go and look at newspapers like you would on a microfilm machine. You can look at the whole issue, page by page. The next one is Genealogy Bank. And you'll notice I have fee out there. It's a paid website. You have to pay to look at the information. I looked into this site years ago when it first came out, and I didn't see it was beneficial to me because it didn't have newspapers of the areas that I researched. So I never paid a subscription. But you might look at it and find it useful for you. Newspapers.com is another place. It's also subscription based. Same thing. I do a lot of Southern research, and a lot of Southern newspapers are not represented on a lot of websites. They're slowly coming on board, but it's just, until they get enough that it would justify me paying to have it, I just don't. But it is someplace you can go. A lot of these places, they'll offer you a 7-day free trial. You can do that. I encourage you not to put in any credit card information. If it allows you to put in a username and password, use it for 7 days, and then it'll go away. Don't put your credit card information in for 7 days, because then that means that unless you call them, contact them, they will charge your credit card. So I just encourage people, don't even go there. So, and of course, Ancestry and FamilySearch.org are always trying to put new newspapers on, new old newspapers. And the last page is very exciting. Who do you think you are? Series premiere starts tomorrow night. And they're on the list of the celebrities that will be talked about. For those of you who don't know what this is, Who Do You Think You Are is a television show that takes a celebrity and traces their ancestry back to Adam and Eve in an hour.
Yeah, and they go all over the world.
And they travel in an hour all over the
But
world.
they don't tell you exactly how to do it.
That is my one.
Except for Ancestry.com.
Yeah,
They
well,
have that in
they're
every
sponsored. They're
Every
sponsored.
time, the very first thing they do.
Well, they're sponsored by Ancestry.com.
Yeah,
Of course.
exactly.
Now, I love this show, and I think it's great because genealogy really picks up when this show comes back on. But I wish they would put a disclaimer on this show that says it took us this many thousands of hours to do this. It took us a year to travel and do this. Because when I don't take clients anymore, but when I was taking clients, I'd have clients hire me, and I would say, okay, this many hours, how many hours do you think it'll take? And I would tell them, and they'll say, well, they do it for an hour on Who Do You Think You Are? And I'm like, oh, okay.
I love it when they go to like a state department, or whatever, and the person comes out and meets them, and they say,
Oh,
we're
yes.
looking for a marriage certificate. Oh, let me get that for you.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me take you in and show you where
Yeah.
your senator
Yes.
great-grandfather sat.
Yeah.
That's real.
But we have to remember that these are all celebrities, so they normally probably wouldn't be doing this anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm actually really interested in seeing Valerie Bertinelli's.
Here's Parson.
Yes, the Jim Parson, yes. Yes, yes. Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed, the part that I enjoyed was Tim McGraw that they did a year or two ago. And they found, and this is one of those things that because why I really emphasize those records that aren't your normal everyday records and archives. They found his ancestor in George Washington's diary from when George Washington was 16 years old. Now, most diaries are not indexed that well, but we're talking about George Washington, so everything about George Washington is indexed to the nth degree. That's how they found that. But it is a source that you would not normally seek out. So that's why I like to use that as an example in my teachings to tell people you got to look all kinds of places. But I encourage you to watch it. You might pick up some kind of research tips or records that you've never heard of before. So I enjoy the show. Like I said, I wish they'd have a disclaimer telling us how many hours they spend.
They've been having past ones this week.
Yes, they're going to start showing, oh, it's on TLC, by the way, if you get TLC. Yes, they're going to start showing past episodes starting tonight, or last night?
No, not night before.
I saw them the other night.
Yes, it's been on for 2 or 3
Okay.
days.
Yeah,
So, but it's, I love it, it's a great show, so.
because I had not seen them, and I got caught up on like 5.
Yeah, with the Rose family, was that last
No,
night?
I saw, the ones I saw was Jim Parsons and.
Love Jim Parsons.
Yes.
Yes, I love hers too.
And,
Wasn't hers the one with the Rose family, or?
no, it was the one where she was just trying to figure out why her father's
Yes.
parents gave him up.
Okay.
All right, tonight we have two. When I give you your packets, if you wouldn't mind just setting them side by side, because that's how we'll use them, because I will teach off of the one I just gave you, and then these are examples for you to look at as we go through the teaching. Newspapers are actually one of my very, very favorite resources to research in. Look it up. All right, let's see here. It's that one. Okay, newspapers. We all read newspapers, whether you actually read the newspaper or you read it online. I think pretty much we all do. Newspapers have been with us since the invention of the printing press, and probably before in some form or fashion. That's how we've always had a form to tell people about the news. It is my opinion that this record source is the most underutilized record source in the genealogy research process. A wealth of information can be found in newspapers about our ancestors, where they lived, and the times which they lived. Newspaper research is number 2 on my list of record sources only because vital records are number 1. So, newspaper research can be very daunting, but once you see what you can mine out of a newspaper, I think that you'll see that it can be. I did not give him his. You laughed, so then I forgot you.
Thank you.
Okay. One thing that we always look at when we look at newspapers are the headlines or the major news events. We always look at that front page, because that's where usually those are. If you will look at your other packet, this is an example of a major news event. This is actually a Houston County Times, back when we had our own newspaper. It's dated December 30th, 1926. This is about flooding that was taking place in the county. Over on the left bottom it says highest water since 82. That's 1882. So in 1926 they had a major flood. Usually on the front page of any newspaper you can find the headlines and major news events. These news events could be something local or national. Even if you think your ancestor wasn't involved in news events, scan these articles anyway. You never know when you will find your ancestor named as a witness to an event or in some other way involved, even if it is minor. Also, major news events could have shaped your ancestors' lives and could very well be the reason why they did what they did at the time that they did it. For example, they moved because of a natural disaster or a disease outbreak. Reason for missing or dead relatives. Things could have happened. That's why they're missing. How many of us have missing relatives? We all have to have one. Military or war news could affect your ancestors. Did I give her everything? Okay. Obviously, wars, military, affected our ancestors. Local disasters or events could have directly affected your ancestors. That's why I give you this an example, a local disaster. The first article here doesn't give a whole lot of local names, but if you look up here, it says local mail service during the high water. It's full of names. It's full of mail carriers' names, the people here locally, how they handled the mail. And this is December 30th, so this happened during Christmas. And it talks about how the Christmas mail got there, you know. And so you think about 1926. Think about it, let's say your ancestor lived in Houston County, their house flooded out. What if they decided to move because of the flood? And now you wonder, why do they live in Illinois? They showed up about 1926, 1927. How come they got there? Maybe this is why. So that is an example of a natural disaster that could have affected your ancestor. And so these types of articles, while lots of times they're not indexed in any newspaper index, it just requires you reading the newspaper. The next one is birth announcements. I do not have an example of a birth announcement. I looked and looked and looked for one and I couldn't find one. I'm sure some of us in here that have children, we even put birth announcements in the newspaper. I don't know if they're done as much today as they used to be. But some newspapers would publish birth announcements. Well, these announcements were published pretty close to the actual birth date. Don't be surprised to find them published months after the child was born. Some of the announcements would be accompanied by a photo of the newborn, and sometimes not. When you get, like this last line, when you get back so far, a lot of times the hospitals would publish lists of newborns. I know that in our newspaper, there was a section which I should have copied called In the Hospital, and they would list Mrs. Pat Davis and son. Then you know, well, she had a baby. May not have named the baby, but you could get, she was born.
They did that in this one until about maybe 10 or so years ago. They would have those in the
Yes.
hospital.
Yes. I think privacy has kind of taken over a lot of that. Yeah.
With that, yeah.
So, but that's hard for us genealogists, but the older newspapers, you can find a lot. So look for birth announcements. But like I said, it may not be tremendously close to when they were born. It may come a few months down the road. Okay. Gossip columns. How many of us read the gossip columns? Don't have them anymore in the newspaper. I wish we had gossip columns. It would be fun. Okay, I gave you an example of a gossip column, actually two, on your next page. This is from July 5th, 1977. And this was the Arlington News, which would have been up here in Arlington. And then you have the McKinnon News, which would have been down by the lake. And so these were actual people who wrote these. And from what I understand, they would call, or most likely people would call them because they want their name in the paper. Back then, people wanted their name in the paper. And they would say, let's see here. Miss Claudia Armstrong has as her guest Mr. and Mrs. Frank Longhorn of Florida and Mr. Harold Armstrong of Indiana. Now, why would we care? Today, we're like, it's like Facebook. Lots of people put this on Facebook and we're like, I really don't need to know that. But it was important back then. It was real social. And this is good for genealogists because there are tons of names in these articles. And it's tedious reading, but a lot of times if you know they ran these articles, you can go from newspaper to newspaper and just find it if you know what area your ancestor lived in. Now the one McKinnon News where it says Miss Robin Stringfield, that's my husband's first cousin. So yeah.
In the Arlington one where it says Mrs. Beatty McMillan, she was the midwife when I was born.
See?
Yeah.
So gossip columns are very useful to genealogists. I love reading them. And you'll be surprised if your ancestors are like some that I have to research in the South that refuse to leave an official paper trail. Lots of times they're in the newspaper, whether they want to be or not. Because back then it was okay to be in the newspaper. Today you don't want to be in the newspaper because you're in there probably for the wrong reason. But gossip columns. These can be wonderful sources of information for our genealogy research, especially for those ancestors that seem to not have left much of an official records trail. While it might take a lot of reading to find anything, it can be well worth the time and effort. The next thing is obituaries. Now, we all look for obituaries. If anything, we'll find the obituary and throw the rest of the newspaper away. I encourage you to read the newspaper. but we'll talk about obituaries. The example that I gave you here, let me just read this. Obituaries are the main item that most genealogists search for and obtain during their genealogy research. That's true. We really live for obituaries. Obituaries are a great source of information on our deceased ancestors. Sadly, most genealogists stop their newspaper research after they have obtained the obituary. There is so much more in the local newspaper. Other items can be found in the newspaper pertaining to your ancestor's death are a death announcement. That is different from an actual obituary. In some newspapers, not all, they would have announced the death pretty close to when it happened, and then the obituary would follow. And then after that, you would have a burial notice. So you could have 3 different things on your ancestor's death. A death notice, an obituary, and a burial notice, and then you could have a thank you type thing in the newspaper from your family.
In the Dixon County paper, that's
Yes.
when I grew up, they would have in these, what you call gossip columns,
Uh-huh.
there would be
Yes.
detailed death
Mm-hmm.
announcements, and maybe 3 or 4 of them at the same time.
Right.
That person.
Right.
But you
Oh,
could-
they announce births, deaths, marriages, everything in the gossip columns. But as far as death records in the newspaper, you can find a lot of different things, not just the obituary. When an ancestor died, let's say they have an estate that's probated, you will have a notice of creditors that had been published normally in the back near the classifieds, which would be the legal notices. So that's another, that doesn't necessarily give you a lot of genealogy information, but will tell you, okay, they have a probate in court somewhere. When did you find those records? The obituary that I shared with you is actually an obituary from Wetzel County, Ohio. This is out of my own personal research. And I share this with you because this is going to sound morbid, but it's my favorite obituary. It's actually a very, very sad obituary. The Barth family came to America in 1854. This newspaper is dated 1898. And if you read, I'm going to read this first paragraph. It says, an appalling fatality occurred at the home of Oliver Barth, 6 miles northeast of Upper Sandusky this morning. And in consequence, the father and one son, Charles Barth, aged 20 years old, now lie in death-cold embrace. Both cut down in the vigor of manhood and health almost without warning, and the presence of wife and mother. I have a lot of obituaries from this family from this same newspaper, and I believe that it was the same person writing these newspapers, and I believe this person went on to a great career as a novelist because his obituaries are fantastic. I'm going to turn this off so you can hear me. Anyway, what happened, and I have researched what this is. Has anybody ever heard of well damp? They died of well damp. So if you come on down, it says about 9 o'clock this morning, Mr. Barth and his wife rigged up a windlass, whatever a windlass is, over their well for the purpose of letting their son Charles descend into its depths and recover several buckets that had at different times become lost while drawing water. The young man sat on the board, which was fastened to the well rope, and was lowered by his father and mother. Think about it. They lowered their own son into the well. When about 20 feet down, Mr. and Mrs. Barth heard their son call to them, but thinking he wished to be lowered still farther down, they allowed him to descend to the bottom, about 33 feet. They then called to him, but could not get no answer. Becoming alarmed, Mr. Barth peered over into the well and saw the body of his boy laying prostrate at the bottom, almost covered with water, plainly showing that something serious had befallen him. Without counting the terrible risk he himself was exposed to, Mr. Barth caught hold of the rope and started to slide down to his son's assistance. But in his excitement, it is probable that he missed his hold on the rope, for he only went a little ways with its help when he plunged head foremost to the bottom and died by his son's side.
First, he was going head first down the thing with the rope.
This is, I mean,
Probably as he fell.
Right.
I guess.
so
I guess it was a wide enough well.
from what I understand, I don't know, well damp, evidently there's fumes that gather in a well. And that when they lowered their son down in there, these fumes overcame him. And whether he died of the fumes or he fell off and died at the bottom. So, yeah, And this obituary goes on much further. This newspaper and this gentleman who wrote these obituaries, or this woman, wrote very lengthy obituaries.
Well, you didn't have any questions when you got through reading.
No, you did not. But I've often said that whoever wrote these had to have gone on to a very good novelist career. But what a tragedy. I mean, you're lowering your own son to his death.
A wife and 7 children.
You
How
know?
they got them out.
Well, if you'll read, it says,
Till 1 o'clock.
where does it say? It says, shortly after noon this morning, a son of S.S. DeBolt, which is actually my relative, a neighbor of the Barth, hastily came to Upper Sandusky and summoned Dr. O.C. Stutz to go immediately to the Barth home, reported that Mr. Barth and his son Charles had gone down into the well, could not be gotten out, and that it was thought, somewhere this is the neighbors. Oh, here it is. They arrived, it's just the neighbors removing the bodies. So I want to know how they got in there and got the bodies.
Well,
The same way, I guess.
Probably that they could have worn some sort of protective something here.
Yeah. So.
I don't
Said
know
it
what
was
they had in
nearly 1
1889,
o'clock.
but maybe something.
Mm-hmm. But his parents was lowering him down, and he screamed, and they said, "Oh, you want to go further? Okay." It's sad. But the thing is that this gives us a lot of information about how these people died and family names. Like I said, it goes on further, and it gives all of his surviving family members. I didn't give you all that. But obituaries, and it's horrible, but in some newspapers, especially big cities, their obituaries are about 1 or 2 lines long because they have so many, and they can't fit them. They can't do this for everybody in the newspaper. So this newspaper is actually, the county is a decent county. It's not big, but their newspaper had room enough to write big, long obituaries. Like I said, this is 1898. So obituaries, I know that you all like to get them, like I do, because it gives us great information.
As a detective, you wonder how they were able to see that far down. And it also says he was laying prostrate at the bottom.
Yes.
So I wonder if the water...
Well, it doesn't sound like there's much
It was
water
almost-
in the well
it
to
was-
begin with.
Right, he was laying right there.
This was in August.
Y'all
This,
just fell on all those buckets they were after.
well, this was in August of 1888, so I'm guessing it was warm, but the well, it sounded like it was almost dry, so they took the opportunity to go down to get the buckets that they had dropped.
Absolutely.
So see,
But it was still damp, evidently.
it was,
It was damp.
I had never heard of
Fumes
well
must have
damp
got
until I looked it up, and evidently there's fumes from a well.
Which would maybe happen when there wasn't that much water. In the
I don't know.
Any confined space is poor in oxygen quantity. People have the same problem in silos, any kind of tank entry.
Okay.
There's not enough,
Well, that sent me on a research mission when I saw well damp. I
And
thought,
you wonder if like mold or some sort of whatever
yes.
accumulated after the water went down and it was damp.
Actually, the water's real clean.
I drank out of a cistern.
Anyway, so like this is an example of, if you could say it, a really great obituary. There are examples of really bad obituaries, if that's also can be said. A lot of times when an ancestor passes away, they will pass away near the publication date of the newspaper. So they will have something in the newspaper, but it'll be very short and sweet. It'll say arrangements not yet. So you'll need to go to the next issues of the newspaper. Don't stop there. Don't think there's not going to be anything. And sometimes I found that they just didn't put anything else. And so, but don't always just go stop at the obituary. There could be a death notice that came out before this. There could be a burial notice, because they have the obituary, and it may even list the services. But then there could be another long article, I've seen them, that details the burial. What kind of flowers, what kind of casket, you know, just they go into great detail. They don't do that today, but mainly in the older newspapers.
Sometimes there could be an error in the original one, and they could reprint it.
Yes, they could.
That happened with the book.
Okay,
They reprinted his obituary.
Right.
So if somebody just saw the first one and stopped,
right.
they would have him correct.
I've also seen where they will have print an obituary that looks pretty complete, and then they'll print another obituary and it's got even more information. So, also thank you notes from the family. We still have those today in our newspapers, and they're usually on the obituary page. And so those are good to have too. And notice the creditors, look for those in the back. That will tell you that they have records at the courthouse on their estate, which could help you as well. Local volunteer organizations news. Most communities have a lot of volunteer organizations, such as Historical Society, the Garden Club, the Rotary Club, the DAR. We have lots of those kinds of things. Well, if you look, this one is the retired teachers. This isn't necessarily a volunteer. This is from, did I put the date on it? This is from the 70s, I can tell you.
1977. Says the last sentence is the meeting.
Oh, yeah, 1977. This is, if you were reading the newspaper, you'd pass over it. I'm not a retired teacher, I don't know this, so you just pass over it. Well, it could have your ancestors listed in it.
Yep.
Somebody that, you know. And so if you know your ancestor was a teacher, that could be something you could look into. You know everybody, I'm sorry.
I know everybody, but I taught with 3 of them.
I went to school with the other half. I went to school to the other half.
And you'll see at the second column, it says present for the meeting are, and they list everyone that was present at the meeting. And so, in most communities, there are many volunteer organizations or clubs that your ancestor could have been involved with. Again, if they did not leave an official record trail, maybe they were involved in community activities and got their name in the newspaper because they attended a meeting. And yes.
So I know you keep a timeline on your ancestry.
Yes.
Do you put stuff like this in your timeline?
Yes. Because at the bottom it says present at the meeting were, okay? So on my timeline, if my ancestor was Christine Osbrooks, on my timeline I would come down if I had the date of the newspaper. And I'd put the date and I'd say Chris attended a retired teachers meeting at, and it probably says where they were. Yeah, at the Common Presbyterian Church.
So even little bitty things
Yes.
like this, you put everything.
Yes. My goal as a genealogist is me, not everybody has to do this, but my goal is try to find some piece of information on my ancestor for every year of their life. Up, you know, from the time that they're making records, whatever time that is. But you can go back to birth and go up that way, but I'm talking about every year, like after they become an adult, because then you have taxes and voting records and things like that. But you can do it now younger, because a lot of kids are in the newspaper for school things. What are you laughing at?
Nothing.
So don't overlook these types of articles. Calendar of events. We have those in the newspapers today. I do not have an example of a calendar of events. A lot of newspapers would have a section entitled Calendar of Events. It's a listing of things that are happening in the community. Today we have one for Houston County called Making Tracks. While these articles normally just list the events, dates, and times, and where it will be held, there could very well be a contact name listed, and it could be your ancestor. Also, one thing to keep in mind too is that things happen in your ancestors' community. Now I know that today when you're thinking about newspapers, you're thinking about the newspapers we get today. And I hate to say it, but sadly they don't contain the rich information that the older newspapers have for genealogy research. Also in the calendar events section you might find happenings listed for a church or organization that your ancestor was involved in, and even though your ancestor is not named, it could give you a sense of what events were taking place during your ancestor's life with the group they were involved in. If you knew that your ancestor went to the Aaron Methodist Church, or the Nazarene Church, or the Baptist Church, if you looked at their events, most likely they went to at least one or two of them. Or events in the community, like the Irish celebration, like whatever. Maybe possibly they went. Of course, I talked to my mother-in-law about the horse show they used to have here. She lived in Stewart. She said, well, they had a horse show? I said, you didn't know they had a horse show for many years? She says, we didn't go to Erin much.
There was one at the Ridge.
I know. And I said, okay. She says, we just, because, you know, back then, even when she, and that to me wasn't too long ago, but you could get everything you needed at Mobley's store, including shoes, clothing. You didn't have to come to Erin. That's what she said. We didn't come to Erin unless it was a special occasion. So see, it's amazing the farther back you go, how farther away everything gets. There's a letter over in the archives, this goes back to the 1800s now, of a gentleman who lives in Danville, and he is needed in court in Erin. And he wrote this letter, and it says, I will get to the courthouse as soon as I can, and I can make the long journey. And today we're like, Istanbul. Yeah, it's about 15, 20 minutes, okay. But if this was 1800s, he's probably got a horse and buggy, take him a whole day, maybe more, I don't know.
20 miles is fast when you go with a horse.
So, yeah.
When I was growing up, our little hometown newspaper, this is the 70s, our little hometown newspaper had birthdays and anniversaries.
Yes.
In the, you know, gossip column area or whatever. Did they have that back, like, you know, in the 30s and the 20s,
yes,
that kind of thing?
In the gossip columns.
You know, sometimes, like, if you have trouble figuring out when somebody died,
yes.
well, if they were having a birthday or anniversary, they were probably still alive at that point. So,
probably.
You know, yeah.
Even today in our newspaper, if you look, they do the birthday wishes here, and they list the person's name, and they don't put the year of birth, but they put the date. So 100 years from now, if their ancestor looks at that and they have their year of birth, they'll have the actual month and day now if they find that in this. And I mean, it's this small in newspaper.
Yeah, and Facebook lets you know.
Yes. Yes. The next thing is engagements and wedding announcements, like you were just talking about. Newspapers publish engagement announcements and wedding announcements that would sometimes include photos of the couple. These announcements could be a wealth of family information. They would normally be published separately and at different times. The engagement announcement being published first, and then after the wedding announcement. In some cases, only one or the other will be published depending on your ancestor getting it to the newspaper. The example I gave you is a wedding announcement. This is after the fact. And I love these because they go into detail about the dress and the flowers and the bridesmaids' dresses. And I don't know that we have this as much today.
In society, in like, my society in like New York and stuff, they do.
Yes.
They'll still have it, or Miami, somewhere like that, yeah. Yeah.
But I have not seen it that much locally, as much of this. I don't know if it's the newspaper not printing them or people not submitting them.
Right, and I think, yeah, at one point, I'm not sure, at one point there was not a charge for a lot of things because it was a event.
Yes.
But even as obituaries and a lot of things
Yes.
now have a charge
Yes.
with them, sometimes just the basic, and I would imagine that stopped a lot of the pictures and all of the other stuff if they had to.
Right. Yeah.
Had to pay to
And
put it
speaking of that, I will say that if you are looking for your ancestor's obituary or marriage announcement or anything like that, and you don't find it, especially an obituary, you think, well, they've got to have an obituary. A lot of places charged to put that in the newspaper, and your family may not have had the money to have it put in the newspaper.
And that's what's happened here.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about even way back when. The papers here locally, they didn't charge for it. They were the longest running newspapers to not charge for an obituary. Do they? I think they do now. I'm not sure. Yeah, they do now. But they were one of the longest running newspapers that did not charge for that. But a lot of your newspapers did. That's why a lot of times your ancestors didn't have an obituary. Because you look and you look and you think, I've got to have an obituary. Who doesn't have an obituary? Well, it's because that family just couldn't afford it. So that's something to think about. So yes, wedding announcements and engagement announcements. They were very important. And I'll tell you what, to me, the most prolific time to find those are in the 1950s, and I don't know why that is. The 1950s, it seemed like everybody's engagement and wedding announcement was in the paper. I think it's because they had those great big dresses that come out like that. Made good pictures. Anniversary announcements. If you have, this is a horrible copy, sorry about that, but newspapers would also publish announcements of wedding anniversaries, especially if it was a milestone, such as the silver, which is the 25th, or the golden, which is the 50th wedding anniversary. This is actually, well, this is their 48th wedding anniversary.
Yes, but it's parents of the first lady.
Yes, right. This is the Christensens. So, and this will help you. If you find this, guess what? You can count back and go, oh, well, they were married at this date if you don't have a marriage date. And a lot of times, like here, if you look in the second column, those present other than Mr. and Mrs. Christensen were former Governor and Mrs. Frank G. Clement and children, and then it goes on and lists who all was there. So it will give you family members, friends, things like that. And a nice photo, which is horribly copied. So those are great to find because they will help you with information. Next is family reunions. This family reunion that I'm sharing with you is the Claxton family. Newspapers would publish a report of a family reunion. Usually these articles were written and submitted by a family member who attended the reunion. Most reporters did not attend family reunions, so you could pretty much guess that a family member turned this in. These articles would almost always include many family names, and especially those who traveled from out of town. That is very important to remember. We have ancestors and relatives that moved away, and we don't know where they went. Reading these types of articles will tell you where they went. Also, don't forget to notice a family reunion announcement that could have been published months or weeks before the actual event. This simple announcement would tell you that your family did have reunions, and maybe you could do some research and find people in your family who remember them or have surviving records from these reunions. A lot of times people did scrapbooks of their reunions. There was usually some records involved. So another thing too is if you see the list of who attended, and it was someone's daughter, let's say, that you did not know who she married, and she's listed as Mrs. Rebecca Watson, well, now you know it's Watson. So all those little tips and tricks help you to find what you're looking for, hopefully. This next one was a surprise to me. Advertisements. How many of us have read the really, really old newspapers that sell those tonics and medicines that will cure everything? Our newspapers always include advertisements of various kinds. In early newspapers, there were a lot of advertisements for medicines and tonics to help with your health. A lot of times those advertisements would include a testimonial from a person. How many have seen those testimonials? Oh, I took it and it cured everything I had. And who'd used the product and found it helpful. I had always discounted these testimonials thinking that the person who was named was fictional. I always thought these were made up, or these are people that are lying and just saying it, they got paid to say it. Well, I found one that actually had an ancestor of my husband in it. If you look at the next one, this is for Munion's rheumatism cure. And this is out of the Baltimore City, Maryland newspaper. And this Mr. James Burnine here in this very first, he actually was born in Stewart County in 1843. He enlisted in the military during the Civil War. He was captured at Gettysburg, and he became a prisoner of war up north. He was released in Baltimore, and he stayed there for the rest of his life until he died in 1924. He married an Irish girl named Catherine Moran, and she's listed as Catherine Burnine. This is the Burnine family that we have here now. It's spelled differently. That's how it was spelled originally. I don't know how it got changed to what it is today. I haven't found that out yet. But this is one of those advertisements that I would have discounted. I would have thought, yeah, you know. But when I found this and it had her and him in it, I thought, wow, wait a minute. Then I thought, okay, how much did they get paid? Because you know they had to get paid something. He was the one that I told you that shot and killed a man in 1890. And actually was acquitted. And this, I don't know if I got the published, if this is, I didn't write the date on it. This was around about the same time I think that happened. So don't discount advertisements. When you see those advertisements, these people are giving testimonials, glance at it, look at the name. Maybe it's, you know, if it's in the local newspaper where your family's from. Who knows? Photographs. How many of us look at the newspaper and there are just a photograph? There's no article, there may be a caption, but no article. Don't discount the photographs. Sometimes you'll find a photograph in the newspaper without an article attached to it. It could be a photograph for any reason. A local club, organization photo, 5-generational family photo. Those are always nice. A looking back photo, an old photo asking for identification, or a family reunion photo. The one I think I gave you two. First one is a old school photo that was published. This is from 1937, but I believe it was published in the 1970s newspaper. They don't do it as much today. They'll do it every once in a while. But this is a newspaper published it. And a lot of times they'll say, can you identify these people? This time they actually listed it. So this is Campground School. And this I took out of, we have a vertical file over at the archives on Campground School, and this was in there. This is what we have. The other photo, which you can't really see the people, this is, my copying turned out really bad, was of a cemetery cleaning. Someone just did a snapshot of a cemetery cleaning and put it in the newspaper. And if you look, it says, at the bottom of the little caption, it says, the group pictured above includes Jim Walker, Donald Clark, G.E. Clark. We all know who G.E. Clark is. And Kevin Spurgeon. The other ones I don't know. Some of y'all might know. Are pictured as they arrived to do their part in the cleaning event.
I know Donald, and he's still in charge of that cemetery.
See? If you, let's just say that you were someone who, none of these people were your ancestors, but you were interested in Cedar Hill Cemetery. Maybe you would seek out these people if they were still living and find out, hey, what do you know about the cemetery? Are there records? How many of us look for cemetery records and we cannot find them because there are none, especially small rural cemeteries. So don't discount the photographs. Public notices and classified ads. These are the things in the back that nobody pays attention to. Now, in earlier newspapers, a lot of ads were dotted throughout the newspaper. I think now they're all pretty much at the back. You see I put underline and in capital letters, do not overlook or discount the public notices and classified ads that are normally found in the back of the newspaper. Your ancestor could have put an ad in the paper to sell his tractor or some other farm implement. Your ancestor could have put an ad in the paper about rental property. You never know what you might find in this section until you check. Now, if you look at your little, what I shared with you, okay? If you look in the first column, it says, the third one, well, second and a half one down, the first one's not complete. For sale, large office desk, like new, reasonable price, called Mrs. Baker at Tennessee Ridge. Now, who do we know that was a Mrs. Baker that lived in Tennessee Ridge? Anybody want to know who that is? She was an author.
Oh, Rachel Maddox.
Rachel Maddox. She's selling a large office desk. I wonder if it's the one she wrote a book on. I know I'm getting hot too. It's hot in the building. The air's not working that great.
Is that a Tennessee Ridge phone number?
Yes, at the time it was.
4 digits.
No, actually it's 827 as the prefix. So, in the next column, look at the top. It says for sale, good mixed, whatever that is, hay. That's okay. Also a Ford tractor in good condition. Wilson Lee in Erin. The next one, beautiful new 300 Bonanza motorbike, good discount. Tank Hill in Erin. And then the next one, bed chairs, tables, rockers, refrigerator, minute odds and ends, Mrs. George A. Cook. Next one, 69-acre cattle farm with plenty of running water, 4-room house, good old buildings, located 8 miles from Erin, 2-mile deep cut south of North 13 Highway, Mrs. W.G. Smith. And this next one is have several choice Hampshire gilts, also females weighing. I mean, it just goes into detail. All these people put their names and number. Today you don't see as many names as you do just a phone number or contact information. You don't have the name as much. But this is...
There again, the
Yes.
expense.
Yes.
It's unreal.
It is unreal. I'm going to turn the air back on.
Please do.
Well, I was messing.
I'm about to get well down.
Well down. Okay. If you look at the next one, it's older. It's a little bit harder to read. This is from 1920, again from our own newspaper, Houston County Times. This one I have a little bit difficult understanding, so maybe somebody can help me. It says, taken up. One white-faced steer, 2 years old. Owner can have same by proving properly and paying cost of advertising. What's
He
the...
lost a cow. Yeah.
He found it.
He found it. He wants
Come to my place at Tennessee Ridge at about November 15th.
But you gotta pay for it.
So
You gotta prove it sure.
that's another different type of
You
advertising.
have to keep it and you'll take care of it.
Yeah, well, because you have cattle mark. It's probably a cattle mark, don't you imagine?
Color, size, age.
Would there be a cattle mark, you think?
They would put they would take
Yeah.
notches on their ears.
Okay.
And lots of times those would be registered at the courthouse.
Yes, they are.
And,
I also know that branding is also registered. They would register those. No? No, really? So don't discount any of these little ads like that. Letters to the editor. It's possible that your ancestor maybe did not do this, but don't discount reading the letters to the editor. A lot of newspapers have letters to the editor. Sections or a section named something else that the newspaper uses to publish correspondence from the readers. Your ancestors could have written a letter to the editor. Also, you can write a letter to the editor today. Keep this in mind. And send it to the local newspapers your ancestor lived, requesting information about the family, or asking anyone related to the family still living in the area for information to contact you. Remember, you will have to provide your name and mailing address before any newspaper will publish a letter or inquiry of this kind. And you may have to pay these days, I don't know. Used to, you could write a letter to a local newspaper like this saying, I'm researching this family. If there's anyone in the area, please contact me, blah, 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 and give your name. You may have to pay today to have that put in. I would also include my email address for someone to contact you. Not all newspapers print these types of things, but it never hurts to try. Now, the example I gave you as a letter to the editor is a little bit different. This is actually from 1873, only 2 years after our county became a county. And this was during the time when cholera was very prevalent. And I find this interesting because it's actually very, very long. I didn't give you the whole thing. It's really long. And it says, there has gone out from Erin some exaggerated reports in regard to cholera and etc., which I wish to correct through your paper. It is well known that cholera has prevailed in Erin in an alarming extent, considering the population of the place, yet the reports have been exaggerated. And then it goes on to tell you the true statement of who actually died. Now remember, this is July the 19th, 1873. More people could have died after this date. But it tells you a few things. First of all, if your ancestors were one of these people listed, they died of cholera, because there were no death certificates at this time and probably no obituary. Another thing it tells you, there was cholera in the area. If your ancestor died about this time, it's possible it was cholera, because this is an event, kind of like the influenza in 1918. I find down, if you keep going down, it talks about Mrs. Bucco did not die of cholera. You want to make that very clear. Because you'll also have to remember when these diseases came along, and if your family got them, today they're diseases. We know more about them. Back then, if you got something, you were pretty much ostracized in your family, even if you didn't have it. So I understand why it says Mrs. Bucco did not have cholera. Because they would not want to think that it's in her home. If you touch something, that you get it, even if you didn't get it that way. So that's an example of an interesting letter to the editor. I would encourage all of you to read your newspapers front to back. And it's very tedious research. But if you get to that point where you are at a dead end, a brick wall, and you cannot find information, just start reading in that newspaper where your ancestor lived. Don't be afraid of newspapers. Don't get overwhelmed by the daunting task of reading and searching through piles of newspapers. You will not find piles of newspapers. You will find piles of microfilm. And I know my eyes I've gone blind many a time sitting in front of a microfilm, looking at page after page. But on Chronicling America, that site that I gave you, you can sit in your jammies at home in your nice, comfortable, air-conditioned home, and you can go page by page and look at the whole newspaper. A lot of these older newspapers like this one, they're not cut up into very easily distinguished articles. And a lot of times I have found those old newspapers, the front page, which should be local news, is mainly national news of what's going on politically in any other way, and it's not a lot of local on the front page. So you'll have to probably go to the second page to get a lot of your local. Oh, the print is very, yes, very, very small. Yes. Huh? Chronicling America. I got the paper here if you want it with the The last thing is current newspapers. I would encourage you to read current newspapers where your ancestors lived. And the reason I say that is because if they stayed in that area and their descendants stayed in that area, you could still glean a lot of good information that's in this section right here about the family of people who, in their obituaries today or things like that, and their descendants. You can get information. I know that my husband's family are from, part of his family's from the Glasgow, Kentucky area, and so I read that newspaper and I find obituaries all the time for people that are part of his family. Now, they don't give a lot of the old genealogy information, but then you can add to your genealogy if you do genealogy of extended families like I do. Today, a lot of the newspapers are online, like our own Houston County newspaper. I grew up in Dixon, and the Dixon paper comes out, I think, still on Wednesdays and Fridays. And so I go to their website and I read it on Thursdays and Saturdays. So, and lots of daily newspapers out there, and that's very daunting when you're researching to read all those. And then some big areas like Nashville, Memphis, Chattanooga, they had more than one newspaper. So if you check the Nashville Banner and you're not finding what you're looking for, then you need to check the next newspaper, the Tennessean.
These papers that they're putting online, do they stay out there or do they put them on temporarily?
They stay on Chronically America. They stay on there.
But like Leaf Chronicle, for example.
Leaf Chronicle. I'm gonna say this, and you correct me if I'm wrong. The way the Leaf Chronicle works is that they put obituaries and news articles on there for a certain amount of time for you to read. After so many days, you have to pay for it. So if you see something that you want, you better print it now. Because in a few days, you won't be able to. You'll have to pay for it. Even a photograph, even anything on their website. Yes, ma'am.
The news from the local servicemen.
Yes.
Was very important too, if you notice, especially during wartime.
Yes.
Scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And then, who is it that published the, was it Ganaway books that had all the obituaries?
Yes, the
That's
Ganaway
very
books. And
helpful.
do we have any in there? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
They're
There.
very helpful.
It was it's very difficult to tell you where to go to find newspapers because depending on where you're looking at as to what's available. Some areas have everything online and you can get to it very easily, and there's some that's like you can't find anything.
Nina did two of
Yes.
the little bitty thin, and I don't remember what they're called.
And they're out in the hallway.
Yes, they're probably out there.
Yes.
They're real thin, but there are two of them that
Yes.
are nothing but collections from when it was the Era Review or when it was
Yes.
the,
Mhm.
you know, the Houston Times or
Yes.
when it was all these different things. And it just has excerpts from a lot of the ones from the 1800s that are really interesting.
Yes, they are. And also, and this may be they may have used the same source to do this, but Tim Pooley, who is a librarian or a resource, I don't know if he's a librarian or he works in the genealogy part at the Clarksville Library. He edited a book, obituaries from the earliest Stuart Houston times, and it's in there. It's a red book up to a certain time. I don't know how far back, but the 1800s and back up. It's mainly obituaries. And I will also tell you in our library, if you have ancestors that are from this area, Houston County, Montgomery County, I would even say Stewart County, there are I can't remember who published them. They're blue obituary books. I'll show them to you after the meeting. There's a whole stack of them starting in 1838, and they go up to the 1938, I believe. And they're indexes of obituaries that are in the Clarksville paper. And a lot of Houston Countyans are in those books. And so check those out. And we have the microfilm rolls of newspapers to go with them. So if you want the whole obituary, you can go to our microfilm. It's in there, and you can get it.
That's where we found one of my, I don't have any grade, but it was 1843. It was Stewart County, obviously, at that time. But it was just
Yes.
his name, and it was a news article, obviously, and not an obituary. It was
Right.
distressing casualty, and it went on.
Yeah.
This wording was.
They have, Clarksville has newspapers dating back, surviving to 1838. So that's before we were even a county. And so it's, But wherever your ancestors are, like mine are a lot of from up north, and so I go online and I do Google searches, I go to libraries and archives in the area and look and see if they have any kind of newspaper indexes. I go to Chronicle America to see what they have available, and so you never know where you're going to find it. Now, it may be that there's not online. You may have to go visit the area and go look at their microfilm. But don't discount newspapers because it would take a lot of reading and research. They're very, very rich with information. Not only if you could find your ancestors, but you can read about what your ancestors lived, how they lived, what was going on when they lived there. If you're lucky enough to have ancestors like I did up in Ohio that came in 1854 and stayed in one county forever, I could read the newspapers and I could know that they all experienced this because they were very much involved in the community. So, anybody got any questions about newspapers? I was going to bring a big stack of newspapers, but I thought I didn't have really old good ones. I had kind of like from the 70s up. I know. But I did bring stuff for us, so I'm going to conclude the teaching and then we're going to get out our white gloves and look at some interesting things. Y'all can, the archives, we've been working on court records. And I learned something. If you're not learning something every day, I like to say you're not really living, you need to be learning something every day. I learned something. As I was going through these records when we first started the archives, I found these records that kept saying county court. Well, I knew we had a circuit court, I knew we had a general sessions court, and I knew we had a chancery court. County court. Okay, county court. Well, that must be the same thing as chancery court. So I put all that together with chancery court. So when I pulled them out a month or so ago to start processing them, I got to thinking about, okay, I really need to find out about this. So where did I go? I went to talk to Robert Brown, who's been there forever. And I said, why did these court records say county court? They should be, what they are should be chancery court. And he explained it to me, so I got a lesson. He said, yes, there was a county court, and there was a county judge that was not really a judge. That's also, today we have our legislative body meetings. They used to be called county court meetings. I think some old people still call them that today. And so what it is, these are mainly, in the county court, you mainly have estate and probate records, guardianship records, some juvenile records, which I did not bring because they are closed to the public. But what I found out was around the late 70s, early 80s, and I don't know who, I didn't ask this question, decided that the circuit court and the chancery court were not making enough money. So they decided to take the estate and probate records from the county court and put them in the chancery court, and take the juvenile records and put them in the circuit court, which pretty much dissolved the county court. So I learned something. So now I have a whole separate collection of county court records. And we have chancery records and general sessions. So I brought some county court records. And county court went all the way back to the 1800s. So anybody need some gloves? Let's see. Till 8. I'm hot. I'm going to be here for another 20 minutes and then we can... Anybody else need gloves? Well, I just dropped them off too. No. It's all right, I got plenty. Gloves.
Do what?
Okay.
No, I don't need it.
Get up, move around. Okay, I'm not handing these. I'm just going to hand you all, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I brought 25, so I'll just lay a couple here and there. These are actually processed. Sometimes I bring you ones that we've not touched yet. These are the ones that we processed, which means we have unfolded them. We've taken all the metal out, meaning staples, paper clips, straight pins, whatever they used. And we flattened them, cleaned them, put them in these. Like I said, most of these are estate records. And then when you look at them and you're done, you can pass them on to somebody else if you'd like. Try to bring the fattest, most interesting ones. Now the paper clips, if you have a paper clip, it should be a plastic coated paper clip. And yeah, no metal. Those are the kinds we use in the archives. I gave you that one for a reason.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I'll lay this here. Remember I was talking about Tennessee Ridge and Scandinavia. Okay. Mm-hmm. You turn that page over, you'll see what I'm talking about. That is from what country?
Sweden.
Sweden. How cool. This is, let me see that, I think. Well, this is a land sale. I thought this was a,
That's there.
that one's not, I couldn't figure out what this was. A lot of times if you'll see on my envelope, on my folders, this is how we process them. I put the name, and I put the date and the amount of pages. So when someone comes in and wants it copied, I know instantly how much to charge. But here I put what the case is, and on some I didn't know, like hers here. It's a land sale, maybe a state, I'm not sure. So, but some of these are older and some of them not so old, but these are just an example of what you can find in an estate probate. When people pass away, even if they didn't own property, their estate most of the time still had to be probated. And they would have debts, and so they'd have to sell what they have for their debts.
I wish they could buy it better.
What?
As I do not feel like walking to the courthouse, I'm mailing you the last letter I received.
What's the year on that one?
1953.
Wow. People will walk.
My granddaddy walked it down
Mm-hmm.
It's all right, I have to read on. This one, of course, is "And the Kingdom of Sweden."
Yes.
Have made constitute and appointed by this president. Do make constitute and appoint the Honorable blah, 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 General of Sweden at New York in the United States of America.
Isn't that neat?
Yes, so neat.
I love this, the wax seal, and that's,
Oh, on the right, I already
Yes.
saw that one.
Yeah, I said you still got metal, but you can't do anything about that metal. You wouldn't dare.
no, I'll leave that in there. Because you want to keep, sometimes you have to keep the integrity of the documents intact.
Exactly.
There's more if you want to look at more. So I like to bring you records to show you, you know, what we have. That these are not online anywhere. These are not on microfilm anywhere. And it's to show you that you have to expand your research.
Those things are still.
No, it's newspaper. Newspaper is very acidic. And so when I come across a newspaper, I put it in these acid-free, so I can keep them in there. But yeah, they're not touching other pieces of paper.
Gotcha.
Because sometimes we'll find documents that'll have, this will have been sitting here, and you pick it up, it's just an orange impression from where it would have been
Isn't it
sitting.
amazing that things like that end up here?
Yes.
Vice Consul of the United States of America at Göteborg, Sweden, duly commissioned and qualified, certified. You know, I mean, it's job.
So Spencer. And that's neat.
That's really cool.
Isn't that cool? And this gentleman lived, I believe, in Tennessee Ridge. And he passed away. And so he still had relatives over in Sweden.
Yeah, I know.
You know, I mean, it wouldn't be if we were doing something else. If we were doing Who Do You Think You Are, and we found.
Oh, yes, I know.
You know. In 1954, the suicides. Because it
I mean, that's a lot of
here it
money.
is at 44, this is 51.
Think about what a casket costs today.
John Swenson.
Oh yeah, if you have, lucky to have one in your packet that has the court costs in it, those are interesting too, because they're a lot less than what they are today.
Visas and enemies. Well, I think a lot of it has to do with this John Swenson and maybe his survivors.
This is his estate. This is he passed away.
That had to do with all of that, because here's another one of the stamps. And this is like 7 years before this one.
So here you go. Here's one that's attached with a letter. It tells you what it is. In reference to previous correspondence in the above caption case, I enclose with power of attorney from the descendant's niece, Agda, Eleonora, Olofskrid.
So they had to have a power of attorney from all the heirs.
Yes, yes.
We still do have a lot of that.
We still do, yeah. But that's very interesting because they had to come from Sweden.
Right.
Yeah.
So if your name, whatever, or there's anything that goes into even this, you have to, you know,
I found some of my
you have to
granddad's.
go through.
Yeah.
First was with the state for that year.
Yes, they were.
Does any of y'all remember Mr., well, if you remember, A.E. Averett I think he owned the lumber company here. His probate record it's like 3 of those. It's stretched out as far as it can go because there was so much to settle. And you also find guardianships where, and we have them today, where our elderly people get to where they can't handle their own affairs, and so they have to be appointed a guardianship or a conservator. Now, Miss Ann Sykes and I had a conversation on the difference between a guardian and a conservator, because it seemed like in his records they were using it interchangeably. So if anyone knows the difference between a guardian and a conservator.
The guardianship I've seen were the children, and the conservatorship was an adult, but
Yeah.
you're using them interchangeably.
They seem to be using them interchangeably in this county court system. Now, it may be they shouldn't have been, I don't know, but they did.
You go Betsy Bar?
Yes, I do. It's Mosman's family.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
because here's a
Trade with you. These
guardian.
are A little bit older. Shit.
Is that
Yes.
for a coffin?
This is S.W. Lashley in McKinnon. Received a D.J. McCauley $25.85 for a coffin
Yeah.
for R.A. McCauley.
How much? They cost a bit more now.
$25.85. 25.
They cost a bit more now.
$25.85 for a coffin.
What year?
Absolutely.
1900.
I love these.
It's still a month's pay.
I just love anything that.
Well, we had Macaulay's here.
And at McKinnon, they sold coffins.
Yes, a lot of your general merchandise stores would sell. It's kind of like the Sears and Roebuck. If you go back far enough and look at there, they sold coffins too.
They even sold houses.
Sold houses. We have some of those here in the county, at least 2. 1, 2. How many we got? I know there's at least one. The Sears Roebuck houses, because
There's
Harvey Brocus owns one. Yeah.
I think there's somebody else.
Yeah.
Sears and Roebuck House, they bought their house.
Is that the one Irene lives in?
I understand she's not living here right now.
I mean, the big 2-story house.
It's the white one on the right-hand side on 147 headed out to the lake.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Step back from the road, yeah.
But the one in the curve right there at Stewart, isn't that a Sears and Roebuck?
Oh, I don't know.
Somebody told me that was the only Sears house.
I thought there were a couple.
I thought that I'd heard there was a couple too.
Yeah, and one was in the ridge. And,
Yeah.
yeah, I think there were several.
What the other half of that was?
And some of these records, like what you're looking at, what she's looking at, and what Miss Pat's looking at, you look at them and you think it's chicken scratch. What does this mean? What, you can't read it. But it meant something back then, and it had to do with their estate. And it was important papers. You can see that they're folded up like they were kept in a wallet or something.
That was
written with a fountain pen.
Yes, it was.
A fountain pen.
Yes.
On a judgment.
They don't have fountain pens anymore, do they?
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
I said, yes, they do.
Not that much.
I also wanted to show you what our latest donation. Miss Robin Freeman, if y'all know Miss Robin Freeman, she's a really good friend of the archives. She actually agonized giving these to us, and she finally came in and said, just take them, just take them. These are Harper's Bazaar from 1913.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Yeah, they are. And this, I'll let y'all look at them. This one is called Good Stories from 1935. Here is another Harper's Bazaar from 1913. Another Harper's Bazaar from 1913. That was bigger. And this one is called Happy Hours from 1915. And so she asked us, you all take this kind of things? I said, yes, we do. And the reason we do is not necessarily there'll be anything about Houston County in them, but if your ancestors lived at this particular time, they probably would have looked at this. And in fact, on one of these, there is on this Good Stories, there's a stamp where it was mailed to Inez Atkins in Erin. So your ancestors read this stuff. They may not have worn these fashions here, but, so.
Well, the hairstyles and.
Oh, yeah.
the knock-
I know, Miss Pat, you're about to die. You want to look at one?
Yes.
No, I did not. I figured you collect everything.
I collect paper.
Collect paper.
You've seen me.
And if it comes through, I've acquired another envelope off of eBay by begging. There's a gentleman who was selling an envelope that was mailed from Erin to someone else, somewhere else. There's no letter, there's no return, anything, but it's stamped 1889 Erin. And so it didn't sell, and so I messaged him and I said, I am the poor little archivist in Houston County. We have no budget. I said, if this doesn't sell, can you please donate it, you know? And so whoever it is wrote back and said, I would be glad to, so that I do sell this to make, because I always say, I understand you're trying to sell this to make a profit, but if you're inclined, you know. So he's supposed to be mailing it to us to add to our collections. So I have to beg in my job.
We all pretty much.
I know. Y'all want anybody else want to look at one of these Harper's Bazaar? This is from January. Big one.
Does anybody remember Billy Burke?
Who?
Billy Burke?
No. Billy Burke is in a TV show today. He's an actor.
No, she.
She, okay.
No, she. I mean, but it has the thing with her in
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
But see, I would imagine, I don't know why I would imagine this, but the Central Hotel that we had here, back, you know, the Central Hotel that was here in the 1800s, I would imagine people dressed in that magazine walking into that hotel.
Right, but what I'm saying is I think, was she not the Good Witch? The Witch of Oz?
Oh, I have no idea.
That's where I know the
Yes,
name.
ma'am.
Yeah,
She was part.
that sounds familiar.
Did Ziegfeld fall?
Y'all want to look at it? No? Anybody over here want to look at it?
Under My Own Vine, Big Tree by Billy Burke.
I don't know where cake or pizzas are. It's almost time to eat.
Oh, Lady Duff Gordon.
Yes, ma'am.
I have the book with the
Does
obituaries
anybody
in
know
it from
Lady
the
Duff
genealogy.
Gordon?
Yes.
Are you gonna get that?
Lady
after
Duff
this?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go get it.
Was on, and she, both of them were
Well,
on.
can you go see if Katie's got the pizzas ordered,
And he,
please?
of course,
Thank you.
went
Wait,
down.
let's
She would-
close this out.
she would-
Just
Oh,
tell
I
us what's,
thought you closed me out after my class.
no, just tell us what we're gonna be doing next month.
I don't know.
Okay.
Our next class is August the 26th, and so please come and join us and learn about genealogy. We will have another interesting topic.
Okay.
No.
Well, I'm glad to know that you don't know anyway.
I did.
Just bring them up as we go.
Lady Duff Gordon was married to Cosmo